Well, this is JC again. I was going over my Jim's journal again. I go back once in a while and read through it. Some of my relatives, my nieces particularly, say they enjoy hearing about things that happened to me when I was a child. I grew up in a little Okie neighborhood. Everybody was very poor, and the parents all had to work. In my case, it was my mother had to work all the time to eke out a living, and the children were pretty much left on their own to do whatever whatever it was kids do when they're left on their own. In my case, it was most of the time I spent down at the river. But there are a few other things too, and this is one here that I'll tell you about. Now, I've called this incidents, and I'll read from it. It's better to read from it than it is to try to just recite it from memory. Okay, it says incidents. It's impossible to put specific times on some incidents I remember, so I'll just tell of them as I recall them, and that's what I wrote down here. I mentioned about the dump ground being a half mile or so from our house. The dump was a part of my life in many ways. A lot of things went to the dump that were very usable to people like me and like us, my family. My mother never dug in the dump. She never would, but I did. And in those days, it wasn't a disgrace to dig in the dump. We considered the dump ground to be just exactly what it was, a place for a lot of good things to be discarded by people who no longer wanted them or needed them. I was forever finding things I could use in some way. I found toys and clothing and books, among other things. The main thing I searched for, though, was magazines and funny books. They call them comic books now. A couple of times I got lucky and I found a large number of funny books that had been neatly stacked and tied with a string. I considered that a bonanza. Funny books were very valuable in the lives of the kids in Little Okie, like marbles or doogies, some people call them. I always call them marbles. Um, they were traded. They were read and then traded extensively. They were funny books are about as close as any of us kids would come to reading anything promoting morality and honesty, which wasn't dwelt on too much in those days, not like it is now. It wasn't a big thing. You just were moral and honest for the most part. But anyhow, this was because of heroes like Superman and Captain Marvel, and Tarzan of the Apes and Dick Tracy, and Batman and Robin and Wonder Woman. They all were revered by us and imitated as closely as possible. Some other popular heroes were Plastic Man, Buck Rogers, and the Green Hornet. Joe Palooka was very popular, a boxer, Joe Palooka, and Popeye the Sailor Man, and the Phantom. There was the Flash and Archie. The movies also made serials of people like movies like Buck Rogers, The Green Hornet, or The Iron Claw, and The Shadow. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. That's what he did it anyhow. Some Western serials were Tom Mix and Hopalong Cassidy. Hoppy was probably the most popular of all of them. And Zorro, the Mark of Zorro, Lash LaRue, Men in Black, who used a whip more than he used his pistol, and Johnny Mac Brown, everybody's favorite. Buck Jones was a silent movie cowboy who was popular even after the talkies came out. My grandpa used to call me Buck Jones. Charlie Chaplin was popular, as was the East Side Kids with Muggs McGinnis, who also was known as Slip Mahoney. The Little Rascals with Alfalfa was a show that stayed popular for many years, and some of these are still seen on TV these days. I haven't seen any recently, but they are. Now on Saturdays we listened to radio programs. Of course, this was long before television was ever even dreamed of, as far as I was concerned. We listened to radio programs such as Mr. District Attorney, Champion of Justice, Defender of Human Rights, and a couple other things they said, and one called Let's Pretend, which is exactly what the program was. It went in and pretended things that were exciting for children. Straight arrow, when you heard the hoofs of a horse clop, 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 and then you hear the string pull back, and the arrow let go. Straight arrow. And of course, the biggie was the Lone Ranger and his faithful companion, Tonto. Hi-ho, Silver, away! Get 'em up, Scout. That was the program. That was the first taste of the classical music for most of us too, as the Lone Ranger theme was William Tell Overture. Diddle-dum, 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 bum, bum, diddle-dum, diddle-dum, bum, 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 bum. And on and on and on. I'm sure we're all familiar with that by now. And there was the popular horror story with the squeaking door. Oh, inner sanctum. Some detective programs were Mr. and Mrs. North, The Thin Man, and later The Fat Man, tipping the scales at 290 pounds. The Fat Man. Oh, there's a little asterisk here. There's not one here, but there should be. The guy who played the Fat Man then later, believe it or not, played Matt Dillon on the radio. I mean, was it Matt Dillon or the Lone Ranger? No, it was Matt Dillon. Yeah, played Matt. I think it was Matt Dillon on the radio, or it was the Lone Ranger. One of them on the radio before it came on TV. Then there was another one that was popular, was Sam Spade. And remember this one, Henry Aldrich, coming, mother. And don't forget the great, great Gildersleeve. And then, of course, there's Amos and Andy, as well as shows like Jack Benny and George Burns and George Burns and Gracie Allen. And of course, Bob Hope was the most popular war effort comedian. He and Dorothy Lamour, the Sarong girl, toured the Army, Navy, and the Marine Corps camps at home and overseas in World War II and Korea. The most popular legs in the war were those of every soldier's pinup girl, Betty Grable. And Phil Harris was a popular program too. I never cared too much for it, but a lot of people liked it. Now, Mother, like most other mothers, had her programs to keep her company during the day when she was home. I think Ma Perkins and Stella Dallas were the two most popular of the daytime shows. Ma Perkins was a sweet little old grandma type lady, and Stella Dallas said, Stella Dallas, who proves that love can be possible after the age of 35. 35. Boy, things have changed since then, huh? Now some of our top models are 35. Anyhow, it wasn't long before those daytime shows were being referred to as soap operas. Because of their popularity with the Housewives of America, and also because a lot of the sponsors of those were different kinds of soap, like it's 44, let's see, 44 and something or other, and 44 100%, 99 100% pure, it floats. And that was, let's see, what was that? Ivory soap. And then there was also one called Lorenzo Jones and his wife, Belle. And one that got very popular was Young Dr. Malone. And when we listened to the radio, we listened for Johnny saying, call for Philip Morris. That was for Philip Morris cigarettes. And the other one says, I'm very froggy to Gremlin on another one. And then you see this voice says, that's my dog Tig. He lives in a shoe. I'm Buster Brown. Look for me in there too. Just like today, some of the commercials were as popular as some of the programs. Another commercial that was very popular was the program Grand Central Station, brought to you by Bromoseltzer. Fights acid 3 ways. Bromoseltzer, 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 Bromoseltzer. It's supposed to sound like the train going along a train engine, chug-a-lugging. And of course, the most popular ads in the nation were the Burma Shave ads. They had witty little rhymes on them, and they were little signs scattered along the highways from coast to coast and border to border. They were very good to break the monotony of traveling. I need to go back to the dump now. This is be a little two-part thing, and I hope it's not going to be too long for just one. If it is, I'll have to cut it in two. Anyhow, this says, back to the dump. The dump was the place where tree stumps and grapevine stumps were dumped also, as well as trash. There were acres of them, and the roots of the big trees were perfect for burrowing around in and making forts and things. My stepbrother Floyd, a tall, skinny kid, a little older than me, and I made many forts and trails through the tree roots. One time we were at the dump with Eugene Bergen and another guy, I can't remember who it was now, who was also there. They were there. And we decided to play a game of shooting at each other with our slingshots. They don't call them this anymore. It's unacceptable. Anyhow, with our slingshots, now they're called slingshots. The idea was to come as close to each other as we could without actually hitting anyone. Slingshots are put a rock in there, like with the little bird, remember? We'd sneak around through the trails and try to sneak up on each other, get a shot in that was so close, so good that it couldn't be considered anything but a hit without actually hitting anyone. And when one or the other side had both parties hit, the game would be over. To call timeout, one had to hold up two fingers in the V style. Floyd and I were doing pretty well, and we'd gotten in a couple of pretty close hits. Then Floyd wanted to call timeout, so he held his two fingers. The problem was he raised up behind his two fingers. Eugene let go of the shot, and it went right between Floyd's fingers and smacked him right in the eye. It hit him in his eye. It barely missed his eyeball. It knocked a chunk out of the side of his head. He yelled, and the blood started spurting out of his face. It scared the hell out of all of us. We thought his eye had been put out, and we ran home as fast as we could. Boy, I tell you what, luckily Mother was there, and she always knew what to do, but we dreaded seeing her, too. She always knew what to do, and she was a whiz at nursing wounds. She looked at it, made sure Floyd's eye wasn't in any danger. Then she did what she always did. She cleaned it up, put some methylate on it and a bandage on it, and told us to be more careful. And we were for a very short while. I think Mother used the methylate because, in addition to its healing power, like I tell in one of my other stories, we never got sick or injured. It wasn't worth it. It burned worse than fire. I think that was the biggest reason we were more careful. It usually was. I went to the dump one more time and found some violets. And I brought them home, and Mother planted them in an old tire. She laid the tire down flat on the ground and filled it with dirt. That was my planter. Those violets soon filled the tire and flowed over the sides. It was beautiful. And I thought, my, what a great gardener I am. Another thing that we kids used from the dump was grapevine roots. Grapevine roots are partially hollow, and when lit on one end, make a pretty good, if terribly harsh, cigarette. Well, we smoked them sometimes, although not for long at a time. They burned our throats so bad we'd be hoarse after a few puffs. Well, it didn't take long for the novelty to wear off the grapevine cigarettes. We liked to smoke, but not bad, not that bad. The dump was a place that made kids look forward to searching. It was full of treasures of all kinds. The trash that was dumped there was dry trash. There was no garbage mixed with it. That made it better through which to root. It's amazing what people threw away. I found coins, even medals, some people medals from the war, and a lot of costume jewelry. I kept a cache of wonderful things I had collected from the dump in a cigar box, and I kept that cigar box for many, many, many years. I wish I had it now, but I have no idea what finally happened to it. I think when I went into the Army, a lot of things that I had saved sort of found their way somewhere else, and who knows where they are now. Now, this is my story from when I was a kid. I hope you enjoy it. And if you do, why, please leave me some kind of comment on here. And this is JC. I'll see you down the road if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise. Thank you.